one of our secretaries like to take the role?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Dan Charlot, present. Susan Ryder, absent. Philip Hood, absent. Mark Berry,
Present.
Julie Gottschall,
Present.
Richard Haig,
Present.
John Rosen.
Present.
Okay, good. We have a quorum, so we can begin. This evening, the purpose of the meeting is to allow the public to comment on the proposed 2017-2018 school budget. People desiring to speak should be recognized by the president, state their name and address, then make their comment. Written comments may be handed to the president. Now we'd like to ask for comments first, beginning with the administration. If Mr. Khan would have, our Director of Finance and Operations, would like to make a comment.
Jay actually has a little presentation
Sure.
for this part.
All of the above. If you'd like to comment while you're doing that, that'd be great.
Just going to take you through the budget presentation. We have presented the budget several times over the course of the year. This, I think, is the fourth time that it's been before you. I will note some changes that have been made since the tentative budget. Since the last time you saw it, I made some minor adjustments to reflect the most current knowledge for the budget. So I'm just going to run through it for the benefit of the board to refresh your memory and for the community. And this will be the final budget for the year. So I'll go through the tentative budget. Just a reminder, it includes the completion of the LBMS renovation project. So the 2017-18 budget is balanced. It's still balanced. We have intentionally shifted a little bit of money out of the IMRF fund just to reduce the fund balance in there because that money is restricted and can only be used to pay for IMRF or Social Security benefits, and the fund balance is higher than we need, so we're levying a little bit less there and levying more in transportation to make up for the shortfall in transportation. Yes?
We often get asked, what do all these acronyms, initials that we use mean?
Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund.
It's a retirement.
So we levy taxes by fund, and certain funds are restricted for use. The transportation fund obviously can be used only for transportation. The Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund and Social Security Fund can only be used to pay pension benefits and Social Security benefits.
Where does that money go? What account does it go into?
So it's just, I've levied more in the education fund, in the general fund, and less in the IMRF fund. So I'm intentionally budgeting a deficit in that fund to try to reduce that fund balance to free up some of that money. And then the debt service fund is $2.1 million that pays our debt service, and the capital projects fund represents some of the planned renovations that we didn't get to. We finished the middle school renovation project, and we agreed we were going to address some of the few items that we couldn't fit into the project or didn't fit into the project over the course of this summer and next summer, and so that's what that $195,000 represents in the capital projects fund. You'll see that I'm purposely budgeting a surplus in education and O&M and operations and maintenance funds. So our operating funds have a surplus, but that money is really just being transferred down so that we're not exactly balanced. This is a little bit of the history of over the past several years. You can see the middle school renovation project in the last 2 fiscal years. This year we are expecting a balanced budget, and we don't have any significant items in terms of excess or deficiency or other sources and uses. It's all revenue and expense for operations and for debt service. Just to quickly go through the revenue assumptions, a reminder, our 2016 tax levy happened a long time ago. We're almost getting ready for the next tax levy, but we increased taxes or brought in more revenue from taxes by about 0.7% on existing property and 2% overall, much of that coming from new property in the community. And then the debt service fund, because our debt service payments went down this year, we extended less in debt service for a net increase of just over 1% or just under 1%. The big change here is in the state revenue assumptions. Since we presented the tentative budget, they have not only passed an Illinois state budget, but they've also passed K-12 school funding reform. and that has added a lot more certainty to the amount of revenue that we're going to get next year. I previously had a fairly conservative assumption for revenue because the state had not been making its payments and had been prorating the amount of money that we were supposed to get. So I've added about $300,000 of state funding to this year's budget, or to this final budget from the last time you saw it. And I've basically added the money to the operations and maintenance fund and the transportation fund. The operations and maintenance fund, in order to fund the air conditioner repair, which I'll talk about in a minute, and then the transportation fund basically to cover the increase in cost versus last year due to the inability to share routes with Lake Forest High School. I'm also forecasting to get our remaining payments from last year that the state didn't make, so we're supposed to be reimbursed for some special ed and transportation costs last fiscal year, and the state was delinquent in making payments. So I'm expecting to get that money this year because they've passed a budget and now have a tax increase and now have the money to make those payments. And then I'm forecasting a 90% proration for our transportation money. So I'm only expecting 90% of that. Are there any questions about that? About the changes in state assumptions?
Do you think we can feel confident that we're going to get all the payment from the state and it'll be kind of predictable and on time now?
That's my assumption. It is the state of Illinois, and I think there's enough wiggle room in the budget that if we don't get it, it won't put us into a deficit. But
okay.
In order to balance the budget, I'm counting on last year's payment plus all of the payments that we should receive this year. And that's been, since they passed the tax increase and the funding bill, I'm fairly certain, I'm not sure about last year's payments, but I'm certain that we'll get all of this year's money because they've stated that and it's all planned out.
So what's the net, either positive or negative, to your budget assumptions with respect to the new assumptions? How many was the difference?
Probably about $300,000 of state money, positive.
Okay. Incremental to where you thought?
Incremental to where I thought we would be. But we've already spent that.
Yeah, I know that makes me feel better.
Yeah. And so here, looking just at revenue, operating funds projecting an increase of about 1%, pretty much flat. We're obviously, and then this is you can see the transportation increase of 233%. That's an increase in the levy for the request for that fund, and also a lot of state money going into that fund to cover our cost increases. So you can see last year we were actually trying to spend down the fund balance, so we under levied in that, and this year we're levying what we need, so it's a pretty big swing in the transportation fund, and that pretty much just is made up for out of the general or education fund.
And I just want to interject, that's because we're still trying to keep transportation subsidized for the full another year, right? I know we're going to talk about this later.
Not another year for the rest of this year.
For the rest
Through this year, we're absorbing the entire cost of
a lot of money.
Right. The revenue split is very similar to what you've seen before. The 4% represents all of the payments that I'm expecting. I think the last time I showed you this, it was 2%, so we've increased it by almost 100%. We had 300,000 in there, and I'm now expecting about 600,000 for state revenue. Looking at our expenditure assumptions, these are the same salary increases, averaging 3.8% for the bargaining unit and 3% elsewhere. Flat FTE with 2 retirements. We had very modest insurance premium increases due to the good work that our insurance cooperative has been doing, particularly on prescription drugs. We added an additional 1.5 FTE in purchase services through our custodial contract with GCA. 1 person in the night crew, and then half a person during the day at the middle school to handle the demands of the new building. We are no longer leasing our district office, so we're saving $60,000 in lease payments. And our supply spending is going down versus last year because we're all moved in. We had more supply expenditures last year just in costs in moving into the new building. The big change here at the bottom is the increase in capital spending. We have the summer work that was already budgeted, but then we're also replacing water damaged IT equipment as well as an air conditioning unit at LBES. The IT equipment that was damaged when our water heaters at the elementary school leaked will be covered by insurance. So I've forecasted both the expense and then additional revenue coming back from the insurance company. And I've got about $275,000 in for the LBES air conditioning, just based on initial estimates, but it could very well be less than that. So I think or it could be more. We're still researching the air conditioner.
What kind of deductibles do we have on the insurance that does pay for some of this stuff?
Our deductible is on property casualty is pretty low. I think it's $5,000. So, for example, when we had the computer stolen a few years ago, we made a claim and we recovered $45,000 out of the, I think, 50 they were valued at. So,
Are we relocating those water heaters so they're not above electronics now? Or
we cannot relocate them, but we'll be looking at what caused the problem and trying to mitigate that so it doesn't happen again. Looking at drainage and how the floor drains work and where the water runs and things like that.
You can put an alarm on that stuff too.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea because if it was not during school, it could have run all weekend and caused a lot more damage than it did.
Put it on Gene's phone.
Thank you, John, I appreciate that.
We our special ed requirements or the special ed funding expenses are lower due to some graduations of students from last year, and then our technology budget was included additional computer leases for the incoming 6th grade students. So we're adding the final grade. So now all of our staff and middle school computers are on lease, a 3-year lease. We're also purchasing Chromebooks for our 4th grade students versus last year we just had 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade. And so this year, or last year we had 2nd and 3rd grade. This year we've got an additional grade level in Chromebooks. And then we also applied, I think 2 years ago, for some money through the E-rate program, which is a grant for schools and libraries from the federal government, and we still have some money left over, so we're using that to purchase a new switch. And then also, lastly, we budgeted for a new website this year, and we've got the signed contract for that, and we should be live by December or early January. We have a new math curriculum at LBES. And then about our transportation increase. It's about 20% increase in regular transportation costs, 18% overall. And again, that's being funded through the increase or through our state aid that we're getting as well as through the tax levy. Any questions about those changes? By fund, again, we're seeing a fairly large increase in transportation. The general fund is fairly stable, and then the O&M fund is increasing just due to the capital expenditures as well as general salaries. The IMRF fund increase of 12%, it's really a small fund, so small changes in expenses have a big percentage increase. It's really no change there other than cost, than our salary increases and benefit increases. And then debt service is 10% below last year, and our capital projects is significantly lower because we were renovating the middle school last year, and this year we just have our summer work.
Savings in debt service, a function of the restructuring of the bonds?
It is a function of the restructuring of the bonds and just the how the different maturities fell out when we restructured them. So we should see from this point forward very stable, slightly increasing requirements annually. And then operating expenditures by function, our salaries are going up 3% and our benefits are going up 2%. Those are both in line with the assumptions that we previously discussed. Purchase services, the increase is driven mostly by transportation and also by the increase in the added 1.5 FTE in our nighttime custodial, which we outsource. Supplies, as I said earlier, is significantly lower. We've moved into the middle school and we have less things to buy to fill the building. Our capital is going up again because of the need to replace the damaged IT equipment as well as the air conditioner. And then dues and fees are flat. So a total expenditure increase, again, versus last year of 3%. How our expenditures break out, it's 2/3 salary and benefits, about 12% debt service, 14% purchase services, and then we've got 7% in stuff, supplies, and capital, and a very small amount in dues and fees. So this is fairly stable from year to year. And again, John, this answers your question about debt service. You can see where we were last year, and then this is where we were this year. We should see another small decrease next year, and then just gradually increasing debt service until we pay off the 2008 building bonds for the elementary school, and then the only thing remaining is the middle school bonds that we issued 2 years ago.
2030.
Just to point out, if anybody's listening, the scale on the side of that chart, just so people know that the maximum differential between 2018 and 2029 is a couple $100,000.
Yeah,
It's hardly anything.
it's small.
It's practically flat.
Right,
Yeah.
especially when divided up over all the property in
Right.
McBluff. And then looking at fund balance, we're expecting a balanced budget, so no change in fund balance, and we expect to end the year at 40% of operating expenditures, or about $6.5 million.
And what was your assumption for replacing the air conditioners?
I budgeted $265,000 for that.
And that's in.
And that's in the budget, and that more or less offset the increase in general state aid that we got.
Any other questions on budget that you will be approving tonight?
None from the board? Questions from the administration? Comments from the administration? Comments from the audience on the budget?
I'm glad it's over. It's been like
All right, so I would like, if there's no other questions, I would request that we adjourn this budget hearing at 7:07 p.m. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're going to adjourn this and then move right into our regularly scheduled meeting. A couple minutes late, but we'll just go right into it. So again, we have to go through all this procedural welcoming. So welcome everybody to the Lake Bluff School District 65 Board of Education regular meeting for September 26, 2017. Leanne, can you please take the roll?
Susan Ryder, absent. Philip Hood.
Here.
Mark Berry.
Yes.
Leanne Sherlow, present. Julie Gottschall. Present. Richard Haig.
Present.
John Rosen.
Present.
So we have a quorum and we can begin. So we will start with our Pledge of Allegiance. If you guys will stand and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We also have an opportunity for public comment. If anybody would like to address the board, please feel free to do so. If not, we'll move along and go to our item number 5, which is the addition of a discussion item. If anybody on the board would like to introduce a future agenda item or discussion item for this evening, please do so now. Not hearing any. I'll turn it over to Dr. Sophie to introduce our new teaching staff for the 17-18 school year.
I am very excited to have both of our principals come up and introduce their new staff this evening.
Well, good evening, everybody. At Lake Bluff Elementary, we have 3 new or returning staff. So my first year, I had, I think, 11 or 12 new staff in the stands. So we have 3 this year, which we're really happy to introduce. First, we have Eric Anderko. He is our new wellness teacher. And Eric has some experience teaching at a therapeutic private school and then also 1 year at Gemini Junior High School. So we're really happy to have Eric here. We have Frances Zale, who's teaching 2nd grade at Lake Bluff Elementary School. Frances is a longtime District 65 employee that's returning this year after a 3-year leave. So we're really happy to have Frances back. We have Sherry Meserve. She is our school psychologist. She filled in that role last year for the leave position and then was hired this year as our school psychologist. So she is also kind of returning and but officially new this year. So we're really excited to have everybody join our staff.
Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. From the middle school, I'd like to first introduce Courtney Wagren. Courtney completed a maternity leave position for us last year, and we're lucky enough to have her return this year. And she'll be in the 7th and 8th grade LA capacity and has filled in as a long-term sub while Angela McNicholas is gone. So thank you, Courtney. We appreciate that. Amber Youngman, depending on how old your oldest children may be, you might remember her. She is our speech and language pathologist, but worked at Lake Bluff East Elementary when that building still existed next door to the middle school, and then filled in some maternity leaves at LBES last year. So we're thrilled to have Amber as part of our staff at the middle school.
Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Hope you all had a great dinner this evening. And now you, of course, always have a choice to stay, but you're more than welcome to go home and get your good night's sleep for tomorrow. So now would be a good time to go if you guys are interested in going home. Thank you for coming.
But you could always watch it on Channel 19 if you hurry home. All right, so there's no reports from the school other than that, right? So we'll move on to the PTO report, and I think I saw it.
We have school reports tonight.
Oh, we do?
Yeah, we have school reports tonight.
Do they know that?
Margaret and Nate, now you guys are...
Well, we definitely wanted to say hello and give an update for this meeting after school has started. Obviously, it's been a little bit eventful at Lake Bluff Elementary School with the facilities between our water and our air conditioning. But the people in Lake Bluff Elementary School have gotten off to a great start. And we do always say when things happen, our staff and students and family really rally together. So we always appreciate that because they're very flexible. One of the new things that we're trying this year is we've created what we are calling Fox families. And what we did is we have about 60 staff members that we have divided up all 560 students to be in a smaller Fox family. Each staff member has a little group that has a kindergartner, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade student, maybe one or more in each grade level. And so 4 times a year we are going to meet and have a pause assembly, and then we will break off into our Fox families so that our students can be in a group with kind of a multi-age group and have a connection with another faculty member at our school so that when they see them in the hallways, they have a connection with another adult and then with each other. So our hope is that the Fox families will stay intact for a few years so the 5th graders will kind of age out and we'll just bring in a new kindergartner, but the groups will stay intact year to year so that they can really establish those connections. So our first one, the groups got together, we all do a common activity and read a story, did a team building activity, and then took a Fox family selfie. So all the groups are doing exactly the same thing, and so we're really excited to kind of create this relationship between students and staff and each other. So that was something new that we're doing this year. We are continuing a report on just our attendance and tardy updates. It is something that we're still really focusing on. I think you'll hear later on either this meeting or another about some of the changes at the state level for those requirements. So Nate and I ran reports about our attendance and tardies so far. So just a reminder that anything over 5 tardies then merits a letter from us and some conversation. So far at Lake Bluff, we have 5 students with 5 or more, which doesn't sound like a lot, but we've really only been in school for 23 days. So that's, like almost 25% of the days, those 5 students have been late. And then as far as absences go, on the 6th absence, then that's when we start having communication with families. And I have 4 students who were absent for at least 6 days. So that is, again, like a little less than 25%. So what we start doing is communicating with those families. We also are proactively having going to have conversations with families that we know attendance and tardies were a concern last year, so that we can hopefully see some positive improvements there. Any questions about either of those things?
I would say that we're off to a great start at Lake Bluff Middle School as well. It was refreshing to move into a building as we started the school year with an awareness for what the building was going to be like, and have our things already in the classrooms and not scrambling to unpack boxes. Teachers felt that it was a much more relaxed, much more relaxing and exciting, not exciting, it was exciting last year, but much more relaxing start to the year for us. One of the things I did want to highlight is a program that is now in its second year. We have a group of students, we call them our Bluffer Ambassadors. They work closely with Carly Quick, and they've been working to welcome new students to our district, new students to Lake Bluff Middle School. They were very active in helping with the new family orientation meeting that was conducted just before the start of school. And as a matter of fact, that group's gotten together and presented Mrs. Bay and I with some wonderful new ideas of things they can do in addition to welcoming families. So we're looking forward to adding things like tour guides, directors to our curriculum night. Students thought that would be helpful, and having undergone curriculum night this year in the format that we did last year, it went very well. But I think having a little additional direction from students who know where to go would certainly be would be great. So thank you to those students. Thank you to Mrs. Quick for coordinating that. As far as attendance and tardies go, as a reminder, tardies, anything beyond 5, triggers that first letter. I have 3 students who have surpassed that number. And then looking at our absences, any absences beyond, it was 7, right? 6? On the 6th, excuse me, on the 6th. We had 3 students at the middle school who've exceeded 6 absences for the year. So that's where we are currently. Wanted to update you on that. Thank you very much.
It's both of you.
All right, thank you. So we're going to move on to our PTO report. Ann Hill will do that for us, the new president of the PTO.
Shorter than Nate. Good evening. I'm Ann Hill. For those of you I haven't met yet, I am the PTO president actually for the next 2 years. So this year and next year you'll get to see me a lot. The PTO hit the ground running in September with our first meetings. We've already got a lot of our usual fundraising activity underway. So the LBES book fair will take place October 5th and 6th during parent conferences as usual. Pumpkin Fest and the Pumpkin Chase will run again this year, October 27th and 28th. Planning for that is underway. And the Kiddos Lunch Program is up and running at LBES for the 3rd year now. So things seem to be moving smoothly there. Some of the things we're working towards this year are helping to increase the grade level libraries at each grade level at the elementary school. We talked to Margaret St. Clair about doing that, as well as providing new risers for the fine arts department so the children have safe risers to stand on. We were really focused on the middle school for the last couple of years with the STEAM lab and then projectors last year. So we're focusing on the elementary school, and then we'll work with Nate to see if there's anything else needed at the middle school this year too. We're going to revamp some of our fundraising activities this year. It is a spring auction year, so every other year we do a spring auction. We're hearing feedback that parents are tired of the kind of fancy party with the silent auction. So we are going to be brainstorming about what new, fresh ideas we can do for that. I'll keep you posted as that comes up. And we started something called Bluffer Nights this year, which are going to replace the middle school book fairs, which just haven't really been successful in the last couple of years. So once a month we'll do a Bluffer Night where a restaurant participates and everyone can pick up dinner at Chipotle or Big 24.25 or whatever it is. And some of the proceeds will go to the middle school to replace the book fair funds. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thanks. Thanks very much. And then we have the Alliance report and Mr. Rickmeyer.
So we're trying some new things this year as part of the Alliance. We had our first event at the elementary school, the Marshmallow Design Challenge. This was something, it's a famous TED Talk, it started I think about 4 or 5 years ago. They run this in lots of other companies where they compete different professions to see how they react to this kind of a challenge. They give you a yard of tape, a yard of string, 20 raw sticks of spaghetti, and 1 marshmallow, and they challenge you in 18 minutes to build the tallest structure you possibly can. They've done this test with CEOs, architects, designers, lawyers, politicians, and guess who does the worst? Just out of curiosity, can you guess which profession?
Architects.
Nope.
Lawyers.
Nope. Recent MBA graduates, by an order of magnitude, do the absolute worst. Who does really well? Kindergartners. And they've been trying to figure out why. We decided to do this as an experiment, having the first and second graders challenge their parents and see which one would do best. We thought we'd get 20 or 30. We had 120 show up, so we had to go buy some extra marshmallows. But it was interesting when we talked about this and we said, you know, why is this important to the Alliance and why are we doing this? There are, I would say, 3 reasons why kids do really well in this, and it's very much tied to our mission, which is why we wanted to do this event. The first, as you go through and we kind of look through this, kids challenge their assumptions. The adults come in and they know marshmallows are light, fluffy, that's very easy. Kids are testing this and trying it on the spaghetti sticks, and the marshmallow is actually very heavy, on a spaghetti stick at least. And so kids will try it and they'll get a sense, they'll experiment with it, whereas the adults are sure it's going to be easy. And of course they put it on top at the very last minute and it collapses and they get a height of 0.0 inches. A lot of the adults got no score because they couldn't get something that was built off the table. The second thing kids do is the teachers teach them really well to play with each other and to communicate with each other. And whereas adults sometimes are talking all over each other, the kids are engaging each other, asking for ideas, listening. I was very impressed when I saw all the interactions that the kids had. But the third, I think the most important thing, is that kids learn how to experiment. So the first time they build something, it fails. They try again, it still fails, but it fails better than the last time. They try it again, and it fails a little bit better this time. They keep experimenting, they keep learning, and they don't give up. Whereas I think a lot of the adults we saw would, especially the recent MBA grads they've seen this test, they try to build this thing perfectly, and at the very last minute they try to put the marshmallow on top, and it fails. They try to get the exact perfect design. They don't iterate, they don't learn from mistakes, they don't welcome that ability to learn and to try again. And so one of the things we really wanted to celebrate is the fact that our teachers are encouraging kids to try, to challenge their assumptions, and to play well together. And the kids did really, really well. I was very impressed by that. I would say the people who won were definitely the structural architects in the crowd. Like some of the parents were really good at this challenge, but the kids did really, really well. And we're going to be doing these kinds of events with age-appropriate challenges for the parents to come see what their kids are capable of, and the kids to get that kind of interaction, kind of show off with their families. For us, it was a good opportunity to talk about the Alliance. When we got out and said, okay, by a show of hands, who all knows what the Alliance is? Like 5 people raised their hand. And that's why we're trying to do this, to encourage our mission, and it allows us to, especially when we talk about try, we want the teachers to be able to try new things and to get that new iPad in the classroom or try that new technique. And last year we were able to fund a kiln in the art room and a hybrid piano and new speakers for the elementary school and foreign language programming and things at the kindergarten level. Just a tremendous amount of new things that teachers get to try. And so if the kids get to try, so do the teachers, and that's a big thing for us. So it went really, really well. We had a lot more marshmallows than I would have expected. No one ate the marshmallows, so I was also very happy about that. And I think only 2 or 3 kids ended up crying a little bit because their parents really beat them. But it was really fun. And we actually got, I don't know if you have time we can show, but we had a great video. Thank you for your help, by the way. Like, I have never known how difficult it was to wrangle a room of 120, and man, you did that really well with us. But so we got a great video, maybe I can play that later. We'll be posting that up on social media. This season, across the year, we'll be doing these kinds of challenges to help promote what we're doing, and then that dovetails right into the fundraising efforts. So for us, the fall fundraiser starts in a couple weeks. The letters will go out. The grants are opening up to teachers pretty much between now and like November. We start voting on all the grants, and then that's in December, which generally is when we award the grants with the new checks and start seeing the new things come in for the school.
Very exciting.
It's really fun, actually. Yeah, I'll send the video out. It was a blast.
Thank you for all
Thank
your
you.
work. It's very exciting.
Thanks.
Yeah, see.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Did you want to make a shameless plug for your organization? Like, if somebody wanted to donate it online, where would they go?
Oh yeah, so we have a wonderful website that allows you to donate online. So the LB65alliance.org, if anyone is listening, it allows you to donate online. The fall newsletter will come out. And we actually have a new concept that I want to run past the PTO as well, something called a dip jar. Has anyone ever heard of this before? Save it for next month, we'll talk about it. There's something new we want to try at some of these events. But yes, LB65alliance.org.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to E. Our business official will give an update on the disposition of property, something we do annually.
So from time to time, we bring this before the board to notify you about obsolete or excess district property assets and how we are disposing of them. You have two attachments that were in your board packet. The first was a list of, those are basically the old computers that are no longer being used, as well as some other miscellaneous tech equipment. And over the summer, annually, as we had purchased computers, we would sell the old computers, and they were auctioned off this summer for just over $28,000. And then attachment B is the list of additional computers that we were still cleaning up and wiping the information off of before we could dispose of them. And so those will be sold within the next month or two.
Does that number, how does that stack up to expectations? Like, or what, did you have an estimate ahead of time what it might be worth?
Well, when I first got here, I think we recycled the computers, and then I started selling them. In the first year, we got about $14,000 for them. The second year, we got $24,000, and so this year we've already sold them for $28,000, and we still have another lot that'll probably go for another 5 to 10. So we're getting a lot of the taxpayer value back out of these assets and being able to keep it in the district and use it for educational purposes.
Are they sold individually or are they bought in bulk?
We started, it's been kind of a learning process. We initially started auctioning them individually or in small lots with an auction company, and they would put it on their website, and we had to do a lot of work to put together the picture and the detailed description of the information, put on their website, and then they took a cut of the proceeds. And during that auction, we had a lot of individuals come up and say, hey, if you are interested, here's my card. We have a business where we take Mac computers and we fix them up and sell them, and we would buy them all from you in one big lot. So the next year, last year was the first year we just basically, I put a whole list together in big, large lots and send it out to 4 or 5 companies and had them bid, and so we did the same thing this year. So it's a lot less work for our staff, it's a lot more efficient, and we don't have to split the proceeds.
Also under Jay's report, he and I had talked about, which I think you already covered in the budget, it's just an update on the air conditioners. We are continuing to do some research. We will most likely have to go out to bid. We'll know more at the October committee of the whole meeting on that. So.
Okay. And that's it for Jay? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now we move on to our Director of Student Services, Technology and Assessment, Dr. Rubenstein. And he's going to provide a report on attendance.
Yes. He's going to do overall attendance.
Okay.
So Margaret and Nate talked with you a little bit about the attendance and where we were at as a district or at the individual buildings. And they alluded to the fact that there's been some changes in attendance rules. So effective on January 1st, 2018, there's going to be a new definition of chronic absenteeism, and it impacts how we look at students in our district. So the definition is going to be changing from where we looked at only unexcused absences being what we looked at to any absence. So whether the absence is excused or unexcused, that is when it becomes a problem and it becomes an issue when it's over 10% of the school days. And so being proactive, we have pulled the attendance list for the last school year. In the early part of October, Dr. Sophie and I are going to be meeting with families who are in the top 5% of the absences overall for the district. So we are talking about students who missed above 29 days of school last school year. Upwards of, we had some students who, not for illness reasons, missed close to 60 school days last school year. So Dr. Sophie and I will be meeting with them in the early part of October, and then Nate and Margaret will be meeting with the next 10% of students on a proactive basis to talk with them about a plan to make sure that we decrease the numbers. We did see a decrease overall when we started targeting this last year. While they were some uncomfortable letters for, I think, parents to get this last year, sort of saying, this is the number of absences that your child had, this is the average number of absences for the district. Certainly, I took some heated phone calls, and so did the principals, and so did Dr. Sophie. But it did actually do its job. It decreased the number of overall absences in the district by a full day. So that is the only thing that we did differently last year as opposed to the years past. And so that's really the only thing that we could attribute that change to. So we plan to continue those efforts and up those efforts this year with the addition of Dr. Sophie and myself getting involved in those proactive conversations with the families who are in really that top tier of absences.
Are there trends emerging among the people who have lots of chronic absences, that there are common reasons why for these absences?
So, that will be interesting to see. Certainly when we have talked with parents and families in the past about this, everybody has a reason about why their child misses school. I think that what we will need to do is to really lay down more clear parameters about what reasons for school absence really should look like. We've heard professionals who only focus on attendance talk about this in the way that they have talked about it. The analogy that has been given to us is a doctor who is working with a person who's at risk for a heart attack, that you meet with a person who's at risk for a heart attack on a monthly basis to walk with them through that journey to see if they're reducing their weight, see if they're doing all those other things, and that we would be doing the same thing for our students who are at risk for having chronic absenteeism throughout the school year.
When you talk about how the definition changed, is that a statutory change or is that a change in our statutory?
It's a statutory change in state law, having to do both with the Every Student Succeeds Act at the federal level and some things having to do just with some state lawmakers who were really struggling with this all over the state. We're not the only school or district that has been struggling with attendance and people pulling their students out for a lot of different reasons.
Anybody else? Questions? Thanks.
It has remained fairly steady. This last year was the first year that we saw even a slight dip. So.
And was that dip among the highest chronic offenders? Did they go down as well, or was it more just the aggregate of the, not?
It was an aggregate. It was an aggregate. So that is something that we have to dig deeper into those numbers. So.
Thanks. Thank you.
It's a good initiative.
Okay, so now moving on to a president's report. We've got nothing. And Dr. Sophie?
My team presented tonight, so we can move forward and
Great.
go on to strategic planning
All
discussion.
right, so our first discussion item is strategic planning. In this case, Dr. Sophie's going to review the mission, vision, and two of the guiding principles of the new strategic plan for the 2018 through 2023 school years.
Actually, I'm going to review the three that you came up with. I'm just putting this back in front of you. We're really not going to have a whole lot of discussion tonight. I did want to bring up one item. Our mission that we've all decided on at this point is to provide each student with quality instruction, learning opportunities, and educational environments that inspire academic achievement, personal growth, and responsible citizenship. Vision is excellence in education, enthusiasm for life, every student, every day. The guiding principles that we've decided on for sure are fiscal discipline strengthens our schools and community. By the way, these are not in any particular order right now. Students learn best when they are actively engaged and individually challenged to achieve their unique potentials. And effective and transparent communication with all stakeholders is essential for the district's success. We had decided as a group that we're going to wait till the themes come out from the next strategic plan before we decide on any further guiding principles. The only other thing that I wanted to put in front of you is with the Park District and the Village doing their strategic planning, we've all decided that we're going to try to have at least a guiding principle or a common goal that all three of our entities adopt in working together.
I didn't think that we had agreed on these as written stone. I thought we agreed conceptually that these were ones.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But these are the only three we decided on.
I've got some wordsmithing, but again, I think it's better to sort of look at it holistically.
Yeah.
So.
And that's all we're doing. So I'm putting it in front because a couple people missed the last meeting.
Those
so
are
they
the
could
three
see.
that we picked out that we wanted something like that in there. Yeah. And in addition to, we were at a tri-board meeting with the park and the village, and we all agreed that it would be a good idea to have something in common across all three taxing bodies, guiding principles, just to show the community that we do work together and we try to be on the same page and not, the state has set us up in competing silos to compete for our taxpayer dollars, and we want to make sure that the community knows we're all working together. So we're going to try to find some unifying language in our guiding principle that all three can share. Anything else?
That's it.
Great. Item B is the discussion of the 2017-2019 fees. We'll be reviewing student fees as well as comparables, and we're going to be looking at transportation, kindergarten, and technology separately from this discussion, and coming back together again in January and February with a final recommendation for fees.
All right, so with that, I am going to tell you I'm going to combine student fees and kindergarten fees discussion. This memo dated February 28th, 2017 details the final student fees that we adopted last year. After much discussion last spring, you as a board directed me and our administrative team to review some of the select student fees a bit more in depth prior to approving student fees for the 18-19 school year. So I wanted to put in front of you, because every month we're going to talk a little bit more about fees, so that when your approval time comes, the recommendation will be a lot easier. On the sheet that was given to you, there are comparables in here that Jay put together, so you can kind of take a look at those. We will be spending some time doing that. The fees that we really wanted to highlight this year, as Mark shared, were transportation, kindergarten, and technology. So our plan is to do the following. Jay is going to be working with Phil on an ad hoc transportation committee to make recommendations to the board on the transportation fee prior to that board meeting next spring. If anyone is interested in sitting on the transportation committee, I'd say give Jay a phone call. There are 4 dates that are set. Jay and Phil still need to determine a time for those dates. We will be talking to administrators on if they have any recommendations for parents. And certainly we're open if anybody would like to serve on that committee. It's a commitment of 4 dates. Jay and Kevin then are going to be working on the technology committee, which I believe John sits on. to review the student technology fee and really figure out how that should align with technology that we're using in the classrooms. So they will also be bringing a recommendation that fits us and is comparable. And finally, we have to have the kindergarten conversation, which I'm going to review for you now so you remember what the issues are. Before I do that, though, I want to see if any of you have questions on the document you have. We are, like I said, looking at comparables. Comparables were on the last page. I would remind you, it's been many years. How many years since we've raised any fees? 4?
Any fees?
Student fees in general.
It's been minimal. I think actually if you look one page above, it shows the history of fees. In 2015-16 was the first time we raised it in many, many years, and then we did another small increase last year, but like $5 a student.
And I know all of you were very conscientious about making sure that it really is a dual issue. It is the issue of making sure that we're bringing in enough money to cover some of our expenses, but also representing our parents and not making those expenses too tough to handle. So
can I just draw attention to something for anybody who's listening? The transportation discussion, transportation fees, as our data indicates, we haven't charged fees since 13-14 for transportation. Prior to that, we charged $215 per student for as far back as we had data, $215, and then we haven't charged anything since 13-14. And just to give people perspective, some of the comparables in Deerfield District 109, it's $536 a year. In Lake Forest 67, just next door, it's $430 a year. In Highland Park District 112, $495 a year. In Libertyville, $425 a year. So transportation is not an inexpensive thing to deal with.
Per student, right? Not
per student.
Yeah.
Most districts too have some kind of a sliding scale. If you have 2 kids riding the bus, you pay a little bit less for the second child.
Also in some districts, it depends on where you live. If you live within a certain radius, you pay the fee. If you live beyond it, you don't. In Lake Forest, everybody pays. But in Deerfield, if you live in excess of 1.5 miles and there's no safety, or there's a safety hazard preventing you from walking, then you don't have to pay the fee. So it's variable depending on the district. But
so
some of the fees are very significant.
This ad hoc committee will be doing the research and talking through some of these things, and we'll be bringing a recommendation to you as a board. Any other questions on fees before I talk a little bit about the kindergarten situation, to put it back in front of you? Okay, I want to remind everybody in reviewing kindergarten fees, especially in Illinois, based upon legal definition of kindergarten and discussions with other superintendents in the area, we're going to need to make a change in how we offer kindergarten. So here are the 3 choices from a legal standpoint. The first one is if we want to charge tuition, continue to charge tuition in the future for our kindergarten full day, we can only have academics in the morning, and then I'm going to say something like fluff or non-academic type subjects in the afternoon. If we charge tuition, the afternoon then has to be more of a child care situation. That's per school code. If we can move all the kindergarten classes to full day, not charge tuition at all, but incur the costs ourselves, which according to Jay is approximately $150,000, we can have academics all day long. For the parents that only want their children in half day, we would do what all the other districts do in our area, and those students could be picked up at the lunch hour by their parents. In the 5 years that I've been here, that number of parents that want their kids to only be in half day has decreased every year. So it's important to know that. The third option then, if I can get my computer to scroll down, we can move all of our kindergarten classes to half day to meet state requirements, not charge any tuition, and no students would have the option of going full day. we don't feel that there's any advantages to this. I still need to be spending some time talking to kindergarten teachers, but I know that as an administrative team that we will most likely be recommending that we go with having all full-day kindergartner classes and incurring the costs. And the reason for that is over the course of the years, our students coming into kindergarten have had a lot more needs as we've had in the past. Several of our kindergartners coming in have never had preschool experiences. I think our parents have really come to rely on the fact that we offer full-day kindergarten. So I believe that our recommendation will most likely be trying to keep all of our kindergartners full day and incurring their costs, which means once we made that decision, Jay will have to budget around the $150,000. But that's kind of the scenario for this right now, which will again also play into student fees when we have that discussion.
Any questions? Is there research to support that full-day kindergarten, kids who go to full-day kindergarten are more prepared
for certain types of students, yes. Our kids, I would say a large proportion of our kids, whether they attend kindergarten or not, will be ready for first grade because of all the experiences that they have with the families and the community they live in. It's important to keep note though that 10 to 12% of our population don't have those experiences.
Okay.
And it's important that the kids get in school and start their academic background.
Is it possible, maybe one of the options that I did not hear you talk about having half day only, is it possible for certain kids who need extra work to do 2 half days, like a morning half day and an afternoon half day?
We could probably do that, but I would also share with you, having handled that one year, it might have been my first summer here, there were many community members that were angry about that because they felt like if you're going to offer it full day to some kids, that all kids in the community should have that option.
And is there a community demand for full-day kindergarten?
Very much so.
Huge, yeah.
Very much so.
What would you say the breakdown of that is, like 90% or something that would like to do it?
I would say that there's very few kids that we keep out because they can't afford it. Our families will budget for it. We do have some kids that would like to go full day and can't afford it, that probably need to be in school. But my understanding is the majority of our families, pretty much everyone I talk to, counts on full day kindergarten.
Yeah.
So what's wrong with option 1 then? Having it, I understand the second part of the day has to be fluff for reasons that I don't comprehend, but I heard you say it's the law. Why isn't that a good option so that we keep the tuition?
It's very important that when the kids are in school, we hit their academics. With all the standards for kindergarten and what's expected in first grade, we can barely get it all in now in a full day. So if we cut that back, literally everything in the morning would have to be academics and everything in the afternoon would be fluff. It's more of a child care situation and not a school situation. And we feel strongly, we see the impact of that with scores. Our kids need their academics. Believe it or not, in kindergarten, and I know because my kindergarten, all I remember is nap time and trying to keep my mouth quiet in the circle because I talk too much.
That's what the snacks
Kindergarten's changed a lot. There are a lot of academics involved in preparation for school. And I really feel like our kids would be behind if we don't offer an academic program all day.
Can we also,
Go ahead.
at some point in the future, I'd like to see some comparables, what's going on in neighboring districts? What do they
We
offer?
could easily do that. I actually did an informal study of that in Lake County. Most of the districts are doing a combination of paying for it or doing the fluff. There are no districts doing only the half day. And a lot of the districts that have been doing what we've been doing are moving towards free kindergarten next year because they're also finding out about trying to do this in a legal manner and follow school code.
I just wanted to clarify.
Go
Sorry.
ahead.
I just wanted to clarify, what I was told about this in the past is that you couldn't do anything in the afternoon that the half-day students would miss.
Right.
So you would have to have, if you wanted to have an art class, for example, they would have had another art class in the morning at some point during the week. So you could do more of the same thing, but you couldn't. And I just want to clarify, because you're talking about fluff, and I'm not sure how people understand that. It literally comes down to childcare, because you can't even do
It has to be childcare.
what some people might say non-academic, like music or art, wellness. Even those activities
Could fit
would
into
be
that definition.
right. Okay, so just
Wow.
gonna,
What about in other states? I mean, I happen to have grandchildren who live in another state, and they go to full day kindergarten free. Is that common in the U.S.? Are we at a disadvantage in Illinois where our kids only get half day?
You know, it's different, as you said, U.S. wide. I will tell you that many districts are fighting the battle of knowing they have to go full day and not having the facilities. That's a big issue in many districts. I do think as the federal government and state governments continue to come through with mandates as far as what we need to cover, and then they assess it to follow up, something has to be done with kindergarten, because more and more of our kids are not having preschool experiences. And I was actually surprised that any of our kids wouldn't have preschool experiences, but we are. Margaret, do you or Kevin, do you, either one of you know, we've had a few kids that have had no preschool experiences at all.
Correct. When you're looking at that 10 or 11%. Unless they have been able to come through our pre-K program in our building, that 10 or 11% of lower income really doesn't have that preschool experience. And then in terms of how many people are requesting half day, this year we had about 9 out of a class of 75. So the numbers are pretty small. Last year's half day class was larger, but that was simply because our full day classes were full, and so the people who registered later ended up in half day because they didn't sign up in time. So the number of folks who are actually requesting half day are, under 10 out of a class of between 70 and 90 students.
We are seeing more and more of that, so I think that's important to keep track of. Any other questions?
The other thing is that there are at least 2 students of that 9 in the half-day kindergarten class who are in that class because they could not afford the $26.50 and did not meet the fee waiver guidelines.
and I think when we tried this in the past, there was one year that I think we had a class size issue, and we covered that by moving some of those students into a full day situation, sort of on the taxpayer's dime, so to speak. And there were families who felt like, gosh, I can't afford to send my child to full day kindergarten, but at the same time, my tax dollars are being used to put someone else's child in full day kindergarten. So I think for that option, I think that we would have to be prepared for. I think that's a legitimate concern for people.
I handled a lot of calls on that one.
Yeah.
So there'll be more coming, and we'll get you some comparables. But it fits right in with student fees, and believe it or not, at the end of this week it's October, which means that we're a couple months away from planning for the new school year already. So it's important we keep this in front of all of you. That concludes mine. Any other questions?
Anybody else?
All right, student achievement
So now we
report.
move on to a report by Dr. Rubenstein, present our PARCC scores.
We are here tonight to talk about PARCC scores. So I wanted to provide you with some information regarding the purpose of PARCC. I know some of you have heard about that and the purpose before. Talk with you a little bit about student scores by grade level and demographic group in English, language arts, and math. talk with you a little bit about student growth in Park year over year, and then provide you with some information regarding our next steps in planning. I give this disclaimer every year at this time that we will not have comparable data until the end of October. We'll release comparable data for other schools or districts until October 31st. So I don't have any other information about how Lake Forest did or Oak Grove or any of our comparable districts did. I really don't. I haven't even asked. Some people have sent, but I have not asked. So there's no comparables here, and we're going to share that with you at the Committee of the Whole meeting in November. So Park is given, it was given this last year during one administration window in April. It's now given in, I will say, several other states and provinces and school districts. The Park Consortium itself has shrunk over the last several years. It is an internationally benchmarked assessment. It's scored by an independent group, and threshold scores, or what's considered college and career ready, are set by the consortium. So that was done a couple of years ago. The Illinois Park contract actually has ended. They extended it with them for one more year. Park scores range from a low of 650 to a high of 850. And really what we're looking at is how well students are prepared to meet college and career readiness benchmarks. And so what you'll see here on this next screen here is the college and career readiness benchmark ladder. So a level 4 in Illinois is considered to be college and career ready, and that's a score of 751. That equates somewhere between it's about the 65th to 68th percentile nationally. That's a pretty strong benchmark. You can see the other sort of national comparisons that are out there along the bottom, and where some of the other states have put their thresholds. I wanted to show you a little bit about our demographics of just the students who took the test this last school year. This is important for a couple of reasons. First of all, the third grade group that took the test this last year had actually a high number of students who are English language learners. About 22% of the class are English language learners. That is higher than the overall district average who took the test, which was about 5%. The numbers on the screen here are only reflective of the test takers, so there are actually some higher numbers in kindergarten and first grade of students who are identified as English language learners. Students tend to test out as they get older, and so that is fairly typical. That specific group of third graders who are now fourth graders, they have stayed pretty solid as a cohort of English language learners. They continue. We have dropped a couple of students who are English language learners, so our numbers may be down to 20 in that group, but still a pretty solid group of English language learners in there. You can see our numbers of IEP students are about average in most of the classes there. The other thing that I will just point out across the board is just especially with that third grade class, is that there is a larger number of males than females, and that will become important in just a second. And then just take a look at the low-income population overall. So those are about representative of where we're at as a district, maybe a little bit higher. We tend to actually have a higher number of low-income students at the younger grades than at the upper grades, and that's just sort of the nature of our population. So in terms of how our students actually performed by grade level for English language arts, I'm just going to put the scores up there. So what we saw for this last year is that at the third grade and fourth grade, our scores in English language arts were lower than we had hoped. So we had only about 40 to 45% of our students at that level 4 or 5 for the college and career readiness benchmarks. That's much lower than we had anticipated, and that is lower than where we have been as a district. As a student goes on in the district, however, the more likely they are to meet those college and career readiness benchmarks. So as you look at the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and as that goes on, a higher number of students are actually meeting those benchmarks. So, and you'll see it a little bit more clearly here in just a second. So what that looks like overall, the red here are the level 1 and 2 students, or the percentage of students who are at level 1 or 2. The yellow is the percentage of students who are at a level 3, and then the green is the percentage of students who are at a level 4 or 5. So you can see, and these are last year's students, so you can see that the longer period of time that a student spends in our district, the higher their score is. When we look at the subgroups, some things to work on here. So students in the ELL subgroup, in the IEP subgroup, and in the low income subgroup, still about 22 and 23% of the students are actually meeting that level 4 or 5. And there is the reason that I pointed out that that number of students in third grade, the male students in third grade, is because we have a pretty distinct gender gap, especially in English language arts, between the number of males who are meeting the level 4 or 5 and the percentage of females who are meeting that level 4 or 5. We've had some preliminary in-depth discussions with our teachers and teams about why that is and what our instruction around this looks like. And our sort of original hypothesis centers around the idea that boys have tended to be more interested in some nonfiction texts. And as we look at our scores specifically related to literature and the literature assessments, those have tended to depress our scores a little bit. And so we are working on what that looks like in our curriculum.
Is that typical in other districts as well? I mean, that the males do?
We're looking at that statewide, and we're looking at that as those are going to be among my first things that I look at when we have the comparable district data. It's not something that we have seen significantly in the past.
Oh, okay.
So,
And this is across all grade levels, right?
across all grade levels.
That's a huge disparity.
Right.
And just to clarify a point, it's an obvious point, but I assume you're talking about this being a college readiness. You wouldn't expect a third grader to be college ready, so these are benchmarks that are
Correct.
To get you there.
Correct.
Right.
So they have backwards mapped from 12th grade on down to actually kindergarten and said, when a student graduates from high school, what skills do they need to have in order to enter college or career without having to take a remedial course, without needing to do X, Y, and Z. And so those are the conversations that have driven these standards and the college and career readiness benchmarks. So then, as we look at the change in scores,
Kevin, I'm
yep,
sorry, one last question.
absolutely.
The other subgroups, do those numbers compare to prior years, or?
So actually, IEP is up slightly. Low income is up slightly. ELL is down slightly.
When you say up, you mean that the percentage in the green is improved?
Yes.
Looks like we've got some work to do.
Yes.
But I also recognize that we have a pretty small population, so it doesn't take a whole lot to influence the statistic, right? If you had just a fluke where you had a year where you've got more boys in the ELL and IEP categories, that would bring down your.
So we are talking about overall as a district, 68 students in the IEP category, 31 students ELL, 40 students low income. Assuming that those are evenly distributed between males and females. I mean,
They're small sample sizes.
they are small sample sizes, but yes.
But you've seen statistical consistency year to year, and some of these
Right.
subgroups and things have been performing not so well for a while.
Yes.
So yes, year to
That's
year,
correct.
in the individual years, there are small sample sizes.
Yes.
But the trend is something that you can look to show that these groups are still struggling.
Yes,
You are correct.
they have.
It is, even with a small sample group, I mean, you have roughly 300 boys and 300 girls. And the difference between the two is 12%. That's a sizable number.
Yeah,
that
It's
is.
36 kids.
Right.
36 females are performing better than the males are.
Right. That
It's
is
not small.
that is not small.
You were on the changes in scores over the years.
That's something you read about, when you read about education in general, the gender gap is becoming broader. In colleges, enrollment is down for men and.
You were
That hasn't changed.
one further.
Girls are always smarter than boys.
Yeah, I think it's funny to joke about that.
Girls are
But I think it's a reality.
All right,
that
so when we
boys
look-
are underserved in our education program. Young boys, if I'm a parent of young men, young boys, I'm concerned. Because young boys are underserved in public education.
You make it up in the wage gap, don't worry.
I don't think it's a joke. I think it's a serious thing.
I would agree. And so, Mark, to your point, I think that those exact conversations took place around every grade level table last week. When the principals and teachers had very serious discussions about why it is that boys are not reading, or that boys are not interested in writing. And is it a matter of we need to put more interesting literature in front of them? Is it that our topics are not just interesting enough? Is it, what is it about that? And those discussions didn't end last week. That was just really a beginning. So that is something that we agree with you on wholeheartedly.
Great.
So when we look at the change in scores year over year, there's actually a little bit to celebrate here. So the 7th and 8th grade classes for last year actually took really big jumps. So the 7th grade class jumped from 71.8 to 83%. The 8th grade class jumped from 67.3 to 82.5. And so overall, we really stayed about the same, slipped probably a little bit from 71.8 to 69.3. Probably not exactly statistically significant. You're talking about the difference of a couple of students there overall. Change in scores.
How invested are the students in this testing? I mean, it doesn't matter to them in the way that an SAT may matter. So do you think that these results could be skewed by that in any way?
That is also something. That's also a conversation that we've had. And if anybody else wants to comment on that, that's a conversation that we've had about the conversations that go on at home. What parents and families are talking about with regard to the PARCC assessment, what students are hearing. And it is important that kids value the assessment and that teachers focus on it and talk about it as something that's important, that it is something that's important to them and that it measures learning and that it's important overall.
I would say that in our conversations, at the middle school, there was a lot of focus on that, and just sort of comparing and contrasting in the way that we as a building have talked about a test like the ISAT as opposed to PARC. And when PARC first rolled out, there being a lot of sort of controversy and conversation about opting out or parents not being in support of that test. And a lot of that has waned over time. And so kind of a renewed idea that while not wanting to create anxiety among students, perhaps a renewed effort to really help students to understand the importance of the test and why in fact we do ask them to take this test seriously. So more difficult to quantify, of course, but certainly something that the staff recognize and want to have some conversations around.
Good.
And we have to have conversations around every single point you've all brought up.
Mhm.
It's our responsibility, and the teachers really they take it very seriously, because it's obvious we need to make some changes. So, math.
So as we look at math by grade level, some different pieces there. So we did a little bit better on the whole, about average probably from where we have been. Still really hanging in there probably in the mid to high 60s. As we, and you guys have all of these in your board packet, as we look at the percentage of students who are at level 4 or 5, again, the lowest numbers, and this is something that has been pretty steady, the lowest numbers are the numbers of students who are at in the 3rd grade class, but in the mid to higher 60s across the board. When we look at the subgroups, most of that gender gap disappears there, but still there's something there. The subgroups, we have a little bit more work to do there, and especially with the IEP subgroup and the low income subgroups, but certainly across the board. And then when we look at the changing scores year over year, this is something that, again, we probably slipped slightly from 67 to 63 overall as a district.
What's that last slide? Long slide.
This last slide.
Right here. This is the
It's labeled wrong. Should say math. You're correct. That is math data. It should say math at the top. You're correct.
One of the other things I wanted to point out about in the math area is when you look at the 60s at the middle school, I have talked to a couple of the middle school math teachers, and they feel strongly that the new curriculum that we're using fills in some of the gaps that exist in UNPARC. So again, when you look at this, you have to look at it from every avenue. And in the middle school case with math, we started a new curriculum this year that everybody's very excited about.
So as we look at what we are doing, so I talked about last week, we really looked at a child-driven, data-specific review of everything with each grade level has already taken place. And what I mean by that is that different than in years past, every teacher in this district, with the exception of 6th grade, which is coming next week, now has a list of how their students performed last year and how their current students performed last year. So they have a comparison. If they have a question about how, I know that Julie finished the test, remember that Julie finished the test really quickly. I wonder if she scored a 4 or 5, or if she was down at another level. They had the ability to look back at that. And that is thanks, I'm going to give thanks where credit is due. That's thanks to the state for giving us that disaggregated data so quickly. That's not something that we've had before. So all of the teachers have that. And so we really did that, and the teachers really dug into that data the last week. and we're very thankful for that time. We are looking at classroom level systematic interventions led by administrators focused on supporting students who need the most support. So one example that I can give you is that is from the elementary school where we are really focused on writer's workshop. And so we have given the instruction, especially to our third grade teachers and fourth grade teachers, that they need to be meeting with a specific number of writers workshop groups each day, and the number of students that need to be in those groups, and being a little bit more prescriptive about the fact that if you have a certain number of students who are at a level 1, that those students may need to meet with you every day as a part of those writers workshop groups. If you had a student who was at a level 5, they may need to, and those level 1 students may also need to be meeting with one of the specialists in addition to you, a couple times a week. If you were at a level 5, those students may be meeting with you only twice a week, and be doing a little bit more of their own sort of peer editing and that sort of thing that's a regular part of the Lucy Calkins writing system. So the classroom level systematic interventions. We've also begun a comprehensive review of each standard and where it's taught in our curricular programs, and we're beginning that with 3rd and 4th grade. So a comprehensive review of the core curriculum to make sure that over the past several years, as we have implemented new curriculum, that every standard is actually being taught. That's not something that we have actually that we have done in the past. We believe, Kelly and I and all of us, that we have a guaranteed and viable curriculum, that the curriculum that is taught in one 3rd grade classroom is the same that's in another 3rd grade classroom, and this is an attempt to verify that that is going on. We are undergoing an intensive review of our multi-tiered systems of support and response to intervention programs, and intensifying our efforts to prepare students and staff with tips and tricks for test taking, and that's something that Nate talked about a little while ago. So just sort of what the future holds. So the Every Student Succeeds Act, which you're going to hear about at the October Committee of the Whole meeting, mandates that we give some form of assessment to every student in grades 3 through 8. 2018 is probably going to be the last year that the PARCC assessment is given. In that format, what we expect to see and what we've been told is that there will be another sort of assessment that looks a lot like the PARCC that is called something else because of the Every Student Succeeds Act. However, the Illinois Every Student Succeeds Act plan is going to change the weight of achievement overall. So around 15% of our overall score as a district is going to be based on the PARCC achievement that you just sort of saw a year from now. And then we expect to have comparable data at the end of October, and we will continue to work on our vision and completion of our strategic plan 2018 through 2023. Any questions? Bill?
It looked like in the classes of 2023 and 2025 there's significant drops in both English and ELA, pretty significant. As an administration, how do you look at like cohorts of teachers in those grades? Is it a teacher thing? Is it just something in the water with those kids? How do you look at that with those particular classes?
So when we see a drop like that, we look at a whole bunch of factors. We start with really drilling down. Actually, we start with the standards. We don't start with the teachers. We start looking at the standards and really where did our students fall down and where are those standards taught. And so maybe it was a standard thing. Once we get past the standard thing and really looking at where those standards are specifically taught and assessed and how we're assessing them. Then we look at how we are preparing students across the board. Maybe there are some issues related to that class of students that we should have expected this across the board, like I talked about with this class of our current 4th graders, last year's 3rd graders, with a high number of ELL students. What we know from history is that it takes about 7 years to acquire academic language in English after you've moved to this country and started learning English, and so we wouldn't expect them to do that. I would say that the last thing that we start to look at after all of that data is put to rest is, was it really sort of the teachers who were the biggest factor in that?
Teachers and or long-term substitutes for
Or
maternity
long-term
leave.
substitutes, yeah.
Because we have such a young staff that often we have teachers out for 12 weeks. And that impacts things too.
But there are a number of factors. I think that all of our teaching staff are really outstanding, and I want to give them credit where credit is due. And I wouldn't want anybody to get the message or the idea that any of them are not doing the job that they're supposed to be doing, because they are doing really a great job and they are really working hard on a day-to-day basis.
I would add that last year we had several grade level switches due to multi-age changes and changes in sectioning. So several teachers did change after if they had been a teacher in 4th grade for several years, then changed to a different grade level. All awesome teachers, but that's your first year of kind of learning the curriculum, and so I wanted to point that out. So there wasn't as much because of new staff, but I would say some had new positions.
So I think in summary, we presented the data to the teachers. We've been working with these data meetings, really breaking down the data, looking at what our core curriculum is, looking at how we're offering interventions, looking at our subgroup data, and really looking at that group that there were a lot of borderline students between the yellow and green, that looking on things to do to push into that. We continue to look at staffing because we have made a lot of changes over the years with moving teachers around, and we have to align ourselves to get the results that we want. We have a very hardworking staff that's very professional, and they're all taking this very seriously.
One of the biggest takeaways last week from our student data review meetings for teachers, I think, was this idea that they needed to focus much more on the students who were at the level 3, that they could actually really work with those students to provide a lot of additional instruction in some way, shape, or form to try and improve their scores and understanding and student learning at that level, and see what that does.
Any other questions?
Anybody else? Thank you, Dr. Lewis.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, we're going to move on to discussions. Actions with discussions. And our first item tonight is item 9A, approval of the Lake Bluff Elementary School water heater and technology infrastructure replacement. Just to refresh your memories, we've talked about this several times this evening. There's a water heater issue, some electrical cabinet issues, and a security camera server issue, right?
Right.
All total, it's roughly almost $62,000 worth of repairs. $20,000 in water heater, $31,000 in the power supply and switches, and $10,000 in the security camera server.
Yes. So all of this work has already been done due to the emergency nature of it, but we wanted to bring the contracts to you for approval and transparency reasons. The water heaters, the first quote we got on the water heaters was actually $30,000, and Steve Miller, our maintenance supervisor, did a great job looking around for other vendors and got a couple of additional quotes. These are, even $20,000 sounds expensive for water heaters, but these are large commercial units. And there's no lift, so they had to manhandle two 550-pound water heaters up the stairs into the mezzanine, and then the same reverse to dispose of the old ones. So these water heaters go for retail for about $8,500 a piece, and then
Just the equipment.
just the equipment, and then the difference is the labor to get it.
And we pay prevailing wage.
And also we pay prevailing wage by law, so that's also
Everyone remembers what
contributor.
that is, don't they?
And
For
then
6 years, I'm crystal clear on that.
Noted.
the technology is also, these are the companies that we use to put in the equipment. They know it the best. Single Path actually came out because we had no internet and we needed to do testing, and teachers were not able to conduct their lessons. They came out and worked all night one night to get it working, so there's some overtime built into the cost there as well. And then we had the last piece was the security camera server, which was fixed yesterday. Monday, yesterday.
Again, all the repairs have already been done, but in spirit of transparency, we wanted to bring that to you.
And
for
the tech
approval.
equipment will be applying for reimbursement with our insurance carrier.
Okay.
I have one question.
Go ahead.
Were these 100-gallon water heaters or were they 50 gallon?
They were 100-gallon. The initial contract that we got said 50, but we corrected the error in the final version.
I noticed that.
Just an editorial, I mean, it's hard to imagine why someone would put 200-gallon water heaters on the second floor of a building. And right above all the technology equipment, it sort of leaves you speechless. So I really hope we can not lose sight of that drainage or doing something.
As part of our facility assessment with White, we're going to look at that. We're going to add that to the list of things to take care of. And also, these units should have been good for 15 to 20 years, and they should
Not
have been
nine.
after 9. So,
And yet, whenever they fail, I mean, it's pretty common for water heaters to
right,
run water
you have
all
to
over the
expect.
place.
And
So.
there's the boilers up there too, so there's lots of other water.
Good.
Oh, that was good.
As part of that assessment, I wonder if there's other things looming that
That's what they're.
we want to think ahead of,
Other things
anticipate things that are poorly designed in terms of.
Other things that were poorly planned.
That's
and
why,
badly
that's why we're
implemented.
working on
Okay.
this facility and
All right.
to do that.
Any other questions on this? Okay, so may I have a motion to approve the Lake Bluff Elementary School water heater and technology infrastructure replacement as presented by the administration?
So moved.
Second. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
John Rosen,
Yes.
Leanne Charlo, yes. Julie Gottschall,
Yes.
Richard Haig,
Yes.
Philip Hood,
Yes.
Susan Ryder, Mark Berry.
Yes. Motion passes. Item 9B, which is the 2017-2018 final budget, which we have seen at least 4 times, and we all know pretty well. We know it's balanced. Does anybody else have any questions or comments they want to add before we take a vote on that? John?
No, I'm all set. I'm seconded.
May I have a motion to approve the 2017-2018 final budget as presented by the administration?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Leanne Charlo, yes. Julie Gottschall,
Yes.
Richard Haig,
Yes.
Philip Hood,
Yes.
Susan Ryder, Mark Berry,
Yes.
John Rosen.
Yes.
The motion passes. Item 9C, the application for recognition of schools. This is a requirement. It's something we do every year, and I'm going to let Dr. Sophie explain it a little bit for us.
Based on a review by ISB and recommendations from the applicable regional superintendent of schools, each public school district and school in Illinois is given an annual recognition status. Such status is a general indication of the extent to which the district and/or school complies with provisions of the Illinois School Code. We have already been notified we are fully recognized, and what you have in your board packet is just the answers to the questions.
Does this cost us any money?
I would say indirectly, everything costs us money because there's things that we have to do to prove we're compliant. But
I was looking for a way to do an all in favor vote. This is what I was getting at there. As opposed
you
to-
can do that.
This is an all in favor.
It's all in favor.
Can we have a motion to approve the 2017-2018?
So moved.
Wait, I was reading the wrong one. I apologize.
It's okay.
May I have a motion to approve the application for recognition of schools as presented by the administration?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. On to item 9D, the 2017 EIS report, which is the Employment Information System. Dr. Sophie?
Illinois State Board of Ed has retired the teacher service record and instead put Employment Information System in its place. This report reports data for teachers, administrators, and other employees. We have to submit it every year and the board has to approve it. Since it's just a report and you're not approving any dollar amounts, this could definitely be an all in favor also.
Okay. So may I have a motion to approve the 2017 EIS report, the Employment Information System, as presented by the administration?
I'm not sure what we're approving, actually.
You just have to approve the report because it's mandated by school code. So you're just approving the report.
I'm just approving.
We're just puppets.
And the reason for that is, John, in the olden days, many board members never saw reports like this. And so the reason they make it mandated is to ensure that all board members see it.
Maybe we should go back to the old days.
So may I have a motion to approve the 2017 EIS report, Employment Information System, as presented by the administration, please?
Richard Haig is first.
I did.
Anybody want to second that motion? Thanks, Mark.
Roll call vote. All in favor?
Did
Something
anybody
about
second
We
that?
need
Witching
four.
hour, this is
We
why.
need four. All in
One
favor?
room classrooms.
All opposed? Anybody opposed? I believe the motion passes.
It did.
All right. Okay, licensed staffing plan for 17 and 18 revision. We're gonna let Dr.
As you
highlight this one for us.
know, anytime we add FTE of any sort, we have to bring this to the board. We made some decisions at the end of the year with some of the issues with our advanced math to have it co-taught this year. When we played it out, we realized that we were short a section indirectly for another grade level teaching math. When you look under the recommendation, you can see how it all plays out. To accommodate the change with the least amount of impact on the overall FTE for the district, Lake Bluff Middle School will decrease the overall amount of time it has with a math specialist by 0.1, meaning that the net increase in FTE is 0.1. And I think I gave you a dollar amount somewhere.
$10,434.
Yes.
All in this year's, in the budget we just approved.
Yes. Already budgeted.
Okay. Any questions or comments? May I have a motion to approve the licensed staffing plan for the 17-18 revision as presented by the administration?
So moved. Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Philip Hood,
Yes.
Mark Berry,
Yes.
John Rosen,
Yes.
Leanne Sherlow, yes. Julie Gutschall.
Yes.
Richard Haig.
Yes.
Motion is approved. 9F independent contractor agreement for Mike L. Hearn.
Mac O'Hearn, and nothing has changed. He's keeping his same dollar amount. He is our independent contractor that helps us evaluate teachers. Everything is exactly the same as last year.
And primarily because you don't have enough time and your staff doesn't have time.
Well, we're all evaluating. You
Yeah,
and I
right, but there's not
evaluating
just
this year.
enough hours in the day to get it done.
Right.
So. Any questions or comments on that contract? The cost for that contract is what, $90 an hour, and is it at the limit?
About 27 grand.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just gonna say that.
All right, I make a motion to approve the independent contractor agreement for Mike McElhern as presented by the administration.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mark Berry,
Yes.
John Rosen,
Yes.
Leanne Sherlow, yes. Julie Gutschall.
Yes.
Richard Haig.
Yes.
Philip Hood.
Well, I'm sorry.
No.
Sorry, Richard. That's an
You
answer.
got a no vote there.
Oh, you have a no.
Yes.
Is that everybody? Motion passed. Motion is
No,
approved.
we don't mind. We pay the guy 6 times more than we pay a substitute teacher to teach our kids.
He's an administrator and you have to be specially trained to evaluate.
All right, letter 9G, personnel report. This month's personnel report includes a non-licensed new hire, Adrian Dowdy, teaching assistant at the elementary school, who's replacing Michael Kaplan effective September 11th of 2017. Also includes a licensed retirement of Liz Schutz, from the elementary school effective October 4th of 16. Licensed FMLA hires, FMLA leaves. Sarah Haslau, sorry if I'm mispronouncing these, a teacher at the middle school, FMLA leave effective 9/8 through 11/4 of 17.
Try the next.
Sarah Panwani, a teacher at the middle school, FMLA leave from November 27th of 17 through March 8th of 18. And Jen Stewart, a teacher at the middle school, also FMLA leave, December 28th of 17 through February 23rd of 18. Any questions or comments on this personnel report?
No.
May I have a motion to approve this report as presented by the administration?
So moved. Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mark Berry.
Yes.
John Rosen.
Yes.
Leanne Shirley, yes. Julie Gottschall.
Yes.
Richard Hay.
Yes.
Philip Hood.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Our final item is a consent agenda for this evening. Consent agenda this month includes our open session meeting minutes for August 22nd, regular Board of Ed meeting August 28th, strategic planning session September 11th, strategic planning session is September 12th, committee of the whole meeting, all for 2017. Also includes closed session meeting minutes for the August 22nd, 2017 regular Board of Ed meeting. It includes our treasury report, our impress report, our bills report, and our P-card report. Would anybody like any of that pulled out for additional discussion?
No.
There's a misspelling of a full session.
Do you know which meeting?
Closed is spelled with 2 S's.
We'll catch you. Look at that.
Closed. Okay. All right. So, may I have a motion to approve the September 26, 2017 consent agenda presented by the administration?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Leanne Shirley, yes. Julie Gottschall.
Yes.
Richard Hay.
Yes.
Philip Hood.
Yes.
Mark Berry.
Yes.
John Rosen.
Yes.
Motion is approved. That's it for action items. Moving on to FOIA requests. We had none, right? This one?
This month.
Yeah. Public comment. If anybody would like to address the board, please do so. Not seeing any. May I ask, does the board, anybody on the board have any other comments that we would like to air? If not, we have a motion to adjourn at 8:35.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Only one wants out? I think we're out.